before we jump in, do me a quick favor. Hit subscribe, tap the like button, and settle in, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the moment you realize a person you love no longer respects you, and what happens when you finally stop pretending you didn't see it. They say the worst betrayals don't happen in dark alleys or behind locked doors. They happen under string lights, with music playing, with laughter bubbling up from people who think everything is fine. It was a warm Saturday evening in Austin, the kind of night that sticks to your skin and hums. Cicadas buzzing like they were part of the soundtrack. Someone's Bluetooth speaker looping a playlist that felt too upbeat for what was about to happen. We had friends over. The backyard lit up with fairy lights, a small fire pit crackling, beer bottles clinking, people scattered across lawn chairs and the edge of the pool. Everyone was loose. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except me. I stood near the patio, half listening to a story about someone's nightmare HOA situation, nodding at the right moments, laughing when it seemed expected. But my mind was somewhere else. It had been drifting there for months, honestly. That quiet space where you know something's wrong, but keep telling yourself you're overthinking it. Then I heard it, clear, sharp, like glass shattering in the middle of the song. Emily, my wife. I could come clean about my little flings, she said, lifting her wine glass like she was making a toast, and nobody would even care. For half a second, my brain refused to process the words. Like maybe I misheard. Like maybe the music warped it. But then the laughter hit. Real laughter. The crowd-pleasing kind. The kind that rewards boldness without asking questions. Emily stood there in the middle of it, cheeks flushed from rose and attention, smile lazy, eyes glinting like she just delivered the punchline of the year. And every part of me froze. My hands went numb. My chest tightened. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stared across the yard. And then, just for a moment, I swear she looked right at me. Her smile didn't falter, not even a flicker of guilt. That's when I knew. I walked toward her. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. People shifted out of the way like they could sense something passing through them. Like I was a ghost with a destination. I stopped beside her. She glanced at me sideways, eyebrows raised like, "You got something to add?" I kept my voice calm, low, but loud enough. "You're right," I said, locking eyes with her. "Nobody will care when you're gone." The laughter died instantly. Her smirk slipped. The confidence drained from her face like someone pulled a plug. "What did you just say?" she asked, but the words sounded hollow, like she already knew the answer. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence did it for me. You ever hear a backyard go dead quiet in Texas? Even the insects seemed to shut up. I turned and walked back toward the patio. Someone tried to chuckle, like maybe humor could stitch the moment back together. It didn't. That's when I heard her heels, sharp against concrete, fast, the wine in her hand sloshing just enough to spill. "You embarrass me," she hissed, grabbing my arm when she caught up. I turned slowly. "Did I?" I asked, because it looked to me like you were doing a pretty good job on your own. "It was a joke," she snapped. "God, Nathan, you take everything so seriously. Flings are a joke now," I said. "Or just me?" She scoffed. "You always twist things. You always hide behind that quiet act when the truth gets uncomfortable." There was no shouting, no scene, just two people standing too close, saying things that had been waiting a long time to be said, while everyone around us pretended not to listen. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't explain myself. I just walked inside. I didn't slam the door, didn't say another word. But something cracked that night. Not because she humiliated me, not even because she might have meant what she said, but because she truly believed it didn't matter, that no one would care. But I did, and that realization settled deep. I'm Nathan, 37, civil engineer, morning runner, decent cook, married 6 years. Or I used to believe in quiet love, the kind that doesn't need grand gestures to feel real. We had a house that stayed clean on weekdays, a king-size bed with mismatched pillows, a dog named Pepper who always curled up on my side of the couch. And that night, every piece of that life shifted. Because when the laughter died and her smile slipped, I saw it clearly. She thought I'd never walk away. But maybe it was time she learned what it feels like to be the one left standing in the dark. The next morning should have felt heavy, like the weight of what happened would pin us both to the bed. But sunlight spilled to the curtains, warm and careless, and Emily stirred with the ease of someone untouched by consequence. She stretched like a cat, humming softly, no trace of shame on her face. I was already awake, already moving. In the closet, I pulled out her suitcase. Every click of a drawer, every folded sweater, every neatly packed blouse felt deliberate. Calm, final. "Are you making coffee?" she called out groggily. "Or just being loud for the drama?" I didn't answer. I zipped the suitcase slowly, not to draw it out, just because nothing about this moment deserved to be rushed. When I stepped into the bedroom doorway, she sat up halfway, confusion flickering across her face. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked. I set the suitcase down gently and met her eyes. "You want freedom?" I said evenly. "Keep it." She blinked, let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking." I didn't move. "You're serious?" Her voice sharpened. "Nathan, it was a joke. A party." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You were laughing. That's the difference." She stood, wrapping the sheet around herself like armor. "You're kicking me out over something I didn't even mean." "I'm giving you exactly what you said didn't matter," I replied. For a second, she looked like she might cry, but it wasn't sadness. It was rage. "You think you're the victim?" she snapped. "I've been walking on eggshells for months. You shut down. You pulled away. This isn't about affection," I said quietly. "It's about respect." She stared at me like she was trying to find the old version of me, the one who always softened first. But I wasn't there anymore. "You'll regret this," she said flatly. "Maybe," I replied, "but not more than staying." I turned and walked out. Behind me, the suitcase rolled across hardwood, and when the door finally closed, the silence that followed felt like mine again. The silence didn't rush in all at once. It settled slowly, like dust after a door slammed somewhere far away. The house felt different almost immediately. Bigger, sharper, honest in a way it hadn't been in years. I stood in the living room for a long moment after Emily left, keys jangling once in her hand before the door shut for good. Morning light poured through the blinds, casting long, clean lines across the floor. No music, no voices, just the softening of the fridge and Pepper's nails clicking as he padded over and sat at my feet. I sank onto the couch. Pepper rested his head on my knee like he knew something had shifted and decided to stay close. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. Mostly I felt clear. Later that afternoon, I packed a backpack and drove to Eric's place. I didn't announce it. I just showed up with a six-pack and a look on my face that said I didn't want jokes yet. Eric's apartment smelled like cedar and old pizza, his usual blend of "I'll clean tomorrow." He opened the door, took one look at me, and stepped aside without a word. We ended up on his patio, sitting in faded lawn chairs overlooking a parking lot that tried and failed to feel scenic. The sky was open, though, big, blue, forgiving. So Eric said finally, cracking open a beer, "What now? You changed the locks? Burned the wedding photos?" I took a slow sip, packed her a bag, told her she could keep the freedom she joked about. He whistled low. "Damn." We sat in silence for a minute. A bird landed on the railing, tilted its head at us like it expected something profound, then flew off disappointed. "I've been thinking about that night," Eric said, leaning forward. "The party." "Don't." I replied. "No, listen," he said. "I need to say this." She wasn't kidding. I didn't answer right away. "That laugh," he continued. The way she said it. That wasn't a bad joke. That was someone who didn't care how it landed. Someone who believed it. My grip tightened on the can. Leaves rustled in the wind like 1,000 quiet witnesses. "I know," I said finally. "I've known for a while. I just didn't want to believe it." Saying it out loud didn't hurt the way I expected. It felt like releasing pressure. "She crossed a line," Eric said. Not just with what she said, but how easy it was, like you were a prop. I nodded. Exactly. He clinked his chin against mine. You okay? I thought about lying, about giving him something clean and reassuring. Instead, I shrugged. Not really, but I'm getting there. That night, back home, the house felt unfamiliar but not hostile. I wandered from room to room like a guest in my own life. In the office, I sat down at the desk and stared at the dark screen of my laptop. Curiosity crept in. I opened Instagram. Emily's profile loaded instantly. Same filters. Same perfect lighting. Same curated smile angle just right. She was at a rooftop brunch downtown, mimosa in hand, laughing with a friend I barely recognized. Caption: Some storms clear the air. I stared at it longer than I should have. Stories followed. Lattes. Gym selfies. Heart emojis in the comments. No mention of me. No sign of loss. And that's when it clicked. She wasn't grieving. She was performing. I closed the app and opened the drawer to my right. Inside sat a manila folder Eric had handed me weeks ago, just in case. Divorce papers. I hadn't been ready then. Tonight I filled them out slowly. Name, address, signature. Each line felt less like an ending and more like a return. The weight on my chest didn't disappear, but it shifted. The next day, my phone buzzed while I stood in line at the hardware store, buying screws for a shelf I didn't even need. One new message. Emily. Well, now it's officially an open relationship. Congrats. It's your fault. No apology. No softness. Just blame. I stepped out of line and hit call. She answered on the second ring. Wow. Didn't expect you to call back. Did the truth sting? Is this how you cope now? I asked calmly. Text between errands? Oh, please, she laughed. You're the one playing martyr. You announced it at a party. I said, you don't get to rewrite it now. Silence. Then, you checked out months ago. Maybe, I said, but I didn't humiliate you. Her breath tightened. Fine. You win. Be the good guy. You stopped being mine long before I asked you to leave. I replied. I hung up. That was the moment peace started creeping in. 2 days later, a message popped up that surprised me. Hey, it's Rachel. I heard about everything. Mind if we talk? Emily's younger sister. We met at a quiet coffee shop on South Congress, tucked behind a bookstore. Mismatched chairs, overgrown plants. The kind of place that encourages honesty. Rachel sat across from me, denim jacket too big for a frame, hands wrapped around her mug. She's not doing well, she said softly. Instagram says otherwise. I replied. That's a mask, she said. You know that. She hesitated, then looked me straight in the eyes. I'm sorry for what she did, for how she did it. Something in my chest loosened. You don't owe me that. I said. Yes, I do, she replied. I watched her push you for months. We talked about family, about patterns, about how some people confuse attention with love. When she laughed, really laughed, it caught me off guard. It was easy, unforced. Afterward, we sat outside on a bench, coffee cups empty between us. I didn't want you to think I was choosing sides, she said. You're allowed to care, I replied. She smiled sad but sincere. I just didn't like seeing someone kind get torn apart. That was the beginning, not of something dramatic, but of something quiet, something real. And for the first time since that night under the fairy lights, I felt it clearly. This wasn't the end. It was a reset. We didn't label it. Not at first. There was no big conversation where we sat across from each other and said, so, what is this? There was no defining moment, no dramatic shift. It started the way the healthiest things usually do. Quietly, almost unnoticed. A text here. A call there. Are you walking the trail this morning? I was thinking about it. Cool. Me too. Lady Bird Lake on a Sunday morning feels like a different city. Fewer tourists. Softer light. The water calm enough to reflect the sky, like it's thinking about something. Rachel and I walk side by side, iced coffee sweating in our hands. The city moving around us, runners passing, dogs tugging leashes, couples gliding by on scooters. We pretended it was coincidence that we showed up at the same time. Conversation flowed easily. No edge. No testing. She didn't ask me to relive the worst moments. She didn't poke at wounds to see if they still hurt. And when silence came, it wasn't awkward. It was welcome. That alone felt revolutionary. After the third walk, she invited me over. "I'm making way too much pasta," she said, and I refused to eat leftovers for 3 days straight. Her apartment was smaller than Emily's. Older, mismatched mugs in the cupboard, a plant by the window that had no business being alive, but somehow was, a cat named Nugget who stared at me like he knew all my secrets. Rachel cooked barefoot, hair tied up with a pencil, humming a song she didn't quite remember the words to. I sat on a stool near the counter, beer sweating in my hand, watching her move around the kitchen with an ease I hadn't realized I missed. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "I'm trying to figure out how you made the sauce smell like that." She grinned. Family recipe, which means I guessed and hoped. We ate on the couch, plates balanced on pillows, Netflix asking if we were still watching, even though neither of us could tell you what the show was about. We talked about childhood, bad haircuts, the terrifying fact that neither of us could parallel park well. After dinner, she made tea. I washed dishes. We didn't touch. And somehow, that made it feel more intimate. The hours passed easily, without weight. No performance. No pressure. Just presence. When I left that night, standing in her doorway, there was a pause. Not the charged kind. The respectful kind. She smiled, soft and genuine. "Drive safe," she said. I did. Days passed like that. Not every day. No rushing. Just moments. A thrift store run on a Tuesday night. A picnic in Zilker Park where we brought too much cheese and forgot napkins. Once, she brought over soup when I said I had a cold. Even though I didn't, she stayed on the porch that night. We talked for hours under a flickering light. When she left, she touched my arm lightly, not flirtatious. Kind. That softness undid me more than any grand gesture could have. Because after years of emotional noise, kindness felt radical. Then came the message. It was just past 6. Rachel and I were sitting on my porch, mugs of tea balanced on the railing, legs stretched out. The Austin air was thick but forgiving. We weren't saying much. We didn't need to. My phone buzzed inside. Once. Twice. 3 times. Rachel glanced toward the door. "Should I go?" "No," I said. "Stay." I picked up the phone. "Emily, preview text. Thought you like a souvenir. You're not as invisible as you think." My stomach didn't drop. It didn't flip. It just settled. I opened it. Photos. Grainy. Clearly taken from a distance. One of Rachel and me walking along Barton Springs, shoulders brushing. One where she laughed, hand resting briefly on my arm. And the one Emily was counting on. Rachel leaning her head against my shoulder on a park bench. Intimate. Peaceful. Obvious. She'd found us. I stared at the images for a moment longer than necessary, then locked the screen. Rachel sat quietly, cradling her mug. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. "She knows," I said. Rachel went still for a second, then nodded. "Okay. Is that okay with you?" I asked. She turned toward me. "Does it change how you feel?" I thought about it. About the calm. About the quiet honesty of what we were building. "No," I said. "It doesn't." She exhaled slowly. "Then it's okay with me." I unlocked the phone again, typed 2 words, and sent them. "You remember?" Then I powered it off completely. Rachel gave me a look. Soft, slightly amused, a little sad. The kind of look that understands complexity without needing it explained. We didn't talk about the photos again that night. We watched the sky darken instead, the purple bruising into blue. A breeze lifted her hair and brushed it against my shoulder. And in that moment, something settled inside me. I wasn't afraid of being found out. I was tired of hiding things that no longer felt wrong. A few days later, the group text came through, the one with the terrible name. The one filled with inside jokes and memes that only made sense after 2 drinks. Eric, birthday bash this Friday. Same spot. Come for tacos. Stay for questionable dance moves. Yes, Nathan, you're coming. I stared at the screen. I didn't need to scroll to know who'd be there. Emily, Rachel, me, same backyard, same string lights, different gravity. I typed, wouldn't miss it. Sent. That evening, I told Rachel. They'll both be there, I said, sitting beside her on the porch. She was quiet for a moment. Do you want me to stay away? I looked at her, really looked at her, the calm in her eyes, the steadiness she carried without effort. No, I said, I want you there. She nodded once. Then I'll be there. No strategy, no plotting, no revenge fantasies whispered over wine. Just truth. The week moved slowly. I went to work, ran in the mornings, cooked meals I actually finished. Emily texted once. So we're all pretending nothing's happening now? I didn't respond. She tried again later. Are you bringing a +1? Should I coordinate outfits with your latest mistake? Silence. Friday came hot and unforgiving. The kind of heat that dares you crack. Eric's backyard buzzed by 6. Music spilling into the street. The smell of brisket in the air. Laughter everywhere. I arrived alone. Rachel came 30 minutes later. Soft green dress. Quiet confidence. Her eyes scanned the yard until they found mine. She smiled, not nervous. Or maybe just brave enough not to show it. Emily was already holding court near the drinks. When she saw me, her smile froze for half a second. Then she raised her glass. Rachel stepped beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't touch. We didn't need to, because tonight wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth. And as the night unfolded, conversations drifting and shadows lengthening, I knew with absolute certainty this party would end differently. Not because I would raise my voice, but because I wouldn't need to. The night settled into itself the way summer nights always do in Austin, slow, sticky, and deceptively calm. Music floated through the yard, not loud enough to demand attention, just present enough to give people something to lean on. Ice clinked in glasses. Someone laughed too hard near the fire pit. Cornhole bags thudded against wood in the distance. Rachel and I stood near the edge of the patio, drinks in hand. Close, but not performative. Not hiding, either. We existed in that middle space that feels dangerous only to people who thrive on control. Emily noticed. Of course she did. She always had a radar for attention, especially when it wasn't directed at her. I saw her watching us from across the yard. Her smile stretched just a little too tight, her laughter half a beat late. She kept refilling her glass even when it wasn't empty, swirling the wine like it might tell her something she didn't want to hear. Rachel leaned toward me slightly. She's going to say something, she murmured, not anxious, just observant. I know, I said, and right on cue, Emily drifted over, drawn by the gravitational pull of an audience. She moved like she owned the space, heels steady on the concrete, shoulders back, chin lifted. People subtly angled their bodies toward her, not because they agreed with her, but because conflict is a magnet. Well, Emily said brightly, raising her glass halfway, "This is cozy." A few polite chuckles followed. I didn't respond. I didn't give her what she wanted. Immediate friction. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Silence forces intention. Her eyes flicked to Rachel, then back to me. "So," she continued, voice coated in sugar, "are we doing honesty tonight? Or are we still pretending this is all casual?" Rachel shifted slightly, not away from me, not toward her, just enough to show she wasn't shrinking. Before I could answer, Emily laughed lightly. I mean, I make one little joke at a party, and suddenly you're auditioning for a new life. That landed harder than she expected. Not with me, but with the crowd. A few smiles faltered. Someone cleared their throat. I finally met her eyes. "You didn't make a joke," I said calmly. "You made a statement." Her smile twitched. "God, you're still on that?" "Yes," I replied, "because it told me everything I needed to know." She scoffed. "About what?" that I have a sense of humor. About how little you respected me, I said. The air shifted. Rachel's fingers brushed mine, not gripping, just grounding. Emily laughed again, louder this time. You're really doing this here? No, I said. You are. That stung. I could see it register. She took a step closer, lowering her voice, trying to regain control. You're embarrassing yourself, she said. I shook my head. No. I stopped being embarrassed the moment I stopped lying to myself. Her jaw tightened. For a second, I thought she might explode. But instead, she smiled, sharp, calculated. Well, she said, turning slightly toward the nearby group, I guess congrats are in order. Looks like you moved on fast. That was her play. Paint me as impulsive, reckless, unstable. Rachel stepped forward. Not dramatically, not angrily, just forward. He didn't move on fast, she said, her voice steady and clear. He finally moved honestly. Every sound seemed to dim. Even the music felt quieter. Emily stared at her sister like she'd just been betrayed twice. You, Emily said, disbelief dripping from the word. Of all people. Rachel didn't flinch. I'm not choosing sides. I'm choosing truth. That hit harder than anything I could have said. Emily's laugh cracked. Oh, this is rich. So now you're the moral compass. Rachel met her gaze. No, I'm just not pretending anymore. The silence stretched. People shifted, suddenly very interested in their drinks, the fire pit, anything but the implosion happening in front of them. Emily looked back at me. Her eyes searched my face, not for anger, but for weakness, for the version of me that used to soften, to smooth things over, to apologize just to keep the peace. She didn't find him. So that's it, she asked quietly. You're replacing me? I felt a flicker of something then. Not guilt, not pity, clarity. No, I said, I'm not replacing you. I'm recovering from you. That one didn't get laughter. It didn't get gasps. It got stillness. Her shoulders sagged just slightly, like the weight of the room finally registered. She opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her glass and drained it in one long pull. Well, she said, setting it down harder than necessary. Enjoy your little rebound. She turned and walked away, heels clicking faster now, the mask slipping with every step. Rachel exhaled beside me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. You? She smiled softly. Yeah. The party resumed, awkwardly at first, then gradually finding its rhythm again. People approached us in pairs or alone. Quiet nods, gentle check-ins, subtle affirmations disguised as small talk. Eric passed by and clapped me on the shoulder. Proud of you, he muttered. I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter, but the night wasn't done. An hour later, as the sky deepened into ink and the string lights glowed warmer, Emily reappeared. She looked different now, quieter, stripped of performance. She approached me alone this time. Can we talk? She asked. Rachel looked at me, questioning but calm. I'll be right here, she said. Emily and I stepped a few feet away, near the fence where shadows softened the edges of things. I didn't think you'd actually do this, Emily said quietly. Show up with her. I didn't plan it to hurt you, I replied. I planned to stop hiding. She scoffed weakly. You always think you're so principled. No, I said. I just finally stopped compromising myself. Her eyes glistened. For a moment, she looked tired, older. I never thought you'd leave, she admitted. I know, I said. That hurt her more than any insult could have. She swallowed. Do you love her? I paused, not because I didn't know, but because the truth deserved care. I'm learning to, I said, slowly, the right way. She nodded, looking down. You always were better at that. Silence stretched between us, not hostile this time, just final. I hope you're happy, she said, not entirely convincingly. I hope you figure out what you actually want. I replied. She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away again, this time toward the house, not the crowd. When I returned to Rachel, she didn't ask questions. She just took my hand. We stayed another 20 minutes. Enough to show we weren't running. Enough to leave on our own terms. As we stepped out onto the sidewalk, the music faded behind us, replaced by the hum of the city. Rachel squeezed my hand. That couldn't have been easy. It was easier than staying silent, I said. She smiled. That's growth. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and realized something quietly profound. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was just present. And as we walked into the warm Austin night, I knew this wasn't just about moving on. It was about choosing better. Not louder, not flashier, just truer. The morning after the party didn't feel like a hangover. There was no pounding headache, no knot of regret tightening in my chest. Instead, there was a strange lightness, like waking up after a long illness and realizing the fever finally broke sometime in the night. Rachel and I hadn't rushed anything. After leaving Eric's place, we took a long walk through quiet streets, the kind lined with old trees and porch lights left on out of habit. We talked about everything except the confrontation, about music, about places we still wanted to see, about how strange it feels when life doesn't demand an immediate reaction. When I dropped her off, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. Soft, unclaimed, full of intention, without pressure. Text me when you get home, she said. I did. The next morning, I woke early, laced up my running shoes, and headed out before the city fully stirred. The trail felt familiar again. My breath found its rhythm. For the first time in months, I wasn't running to escape something. I was running because I wanted to. Later that afternoon, Emily texted, "We need to talk." For real this time. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "We already did." That was it. No follow-up. No argument. Just a boundary drawn clearly, without apology. A week later, the divorce papers were finalized. No dramatic courtroom scene. No cinematic confrontation. Just signatures, legal language, and a clerk who slid the documents across the counter like she did this 100 times a day. And she probably did. I expected to feel hollow afterward. Instead, I felt grounded. Life has a way of filling space when you finally clear it out. Rachel and I didn't suddenly become inseparable. We didn't move in together. We didn't rush to define anything. We kept choosing each other, intentionally, gently. Sunday breakfast turned into a thing. She made pancakes. I brought fruit and coffee. Nugget the cat judged us from a distance. We talked about hard things when they came up, about trust, about fear, about the shadows our past cast. And when one of us needed space, the other didn't interpret as rejection. That was new. One evening, sitting on my couch, Pepper snoring between us, Rachel traced a small circle on my wrist and said, "You know, I used to think love had to feel loud to be real." I smiled. "Me too." "Turns out," she said softly, "quiet can be stronger." The house changed with me. I rearranged furniture, took down photos that no longer felt like memories, and replaced them with art that made me pause. The shelf I bought screws for finally went up. It held books I'd been meaning to read, and plants I somehow kept alive. One afternoon, while sorting through a box in the garage, I found a stack of old cards Emily had written me over the years. Birthday notes, anniversary messages, words like forever and always written in looping script. I sat there for a while, reading them. They weren't lies. Not entirely. They were intentions that didn't survive reality. I put them back in the box, taped it shut, and labeled it past. Then I donated the box. Not out of anger. Out of respect for who I was and who I wasn't anymore. A month later, I ran into Emily at the grocery store. No warning. No build-up. Just a shared aisle and a mutual recognition that made time hesitate. She looked different. Not worse. Just stripped of certainty. "Hey," she said. "Hey." An awkward pause. "You look good," she offered. "Thanks," I replied. "You too." She glanced at my cart. Vegetables. Chicken. Coffee Rachel liked. "I heard about you and Rachel," she said. "I'm sure you did." She nodded. I didn't think it would be her. "I didn't plan it," I said. "Life rarely checks with us first." She sighed. I really mess things up. I met her eyes. Yes, but that doesn't mean you're broken. She looked surprised by that. Maybe she expected bitterness. Or triumph. I hope you find what you're looking for. I added. She smiled faintly. I think I'm finally trying to. We parted without drama. No closure speech. Just mutual understanding. That night, Rachel and I cooked dinner together. Music playing softly. Wine breathing on the counter. At one point, she turned to me and said, "You're lighter lately." I stopped carrying things that weren't mine. I said. She nodded. That'll do it. Weeks turned into months. The relationship deepened, not in grand declarations, but in consistency, in showing up, in choosing honesty even when it felt vulnerable. One evening, sitting on the porch in the same flickering light where so much had changed, Rachel said, "I don't want to rush you." "I don't feel rushed," I replied. She smiled. "Good, because I don't want to be a reaction to your past." "You're not," I said without hesitation. "You're a choice." She reached for my hand, held it. That's when I knew. This wasn't healing disguised as romance. This was connection built on clarity. And clarity is a powerful thing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just stands there and waits for you to finally see it. There's a moment in every rebuilt life where the novelty wears off, the adrenaline fades, the new chapter energy settles, and what's left is a quiet test. Is this still right when nothing dramatic is happening? That's where I found myself about 3 months in. Not unhappy, not restless, just aware. Rachel and I were sitting at a tiny outdoor table behind a taco truck we'd both sworn was the best in Austin, even though neither of us could remember the name. The sun was dipping low, the air thick with heat and cilantro, and she was mid-story about a disastrous work meeting when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, and slid it face down on the table. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly, then paused. Yeah, family stuff." I nodded, didn't press. That was something we'd both learned, how not to interrogate each other into honesty. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was respect. But later that night, lying in bed with Pepper snoring at our feet, I felt it, that old, familiar twitch in my chest. Not jealousy, not fear, something subtler. Expectation. The dangerous kind. The kind that whispers, "Don't mess this up. Don't lose this. Be careful." I hated that voice. I knew where it led. So the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I talked about it. Over coffee, I said, "Can I tell you something without you trying to fix it?" Rachel smiled. That's usually how you start the important stuff. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of you, of myself. Of turning this into something fragile, because I'm afraid to lose it." She listened, really listened. No defensive posture. No reassuring cliches. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "And for what it's worth, I'm not here because I need you to be perfect. I'm here because you're honest." That landed deeper than any "I love you" ever had. Because honesty isn't romantic in movies. It doesn't swell with music. It doesn't look good on Instagram. But it's solid. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Emily emailed me. Not a text, not a jab, an actual email. Subject line, a question. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Nathan, I know I don't have a right to ask much anymore, but I need to know something. Did you ever really love me? Or was I just convenient?" I read it twice, then a third time, and what surprised me wasn't anger. It was sadness. Not for her, for the version of me who would have twisted himself into not trying to answer that question correctly. I didn't respond right away. That night, Rachel found me sitting on the porch, laptop closed, email still open in my head. "You're thinking loud," she said gently. I told her. All of it. She didn't react the way I expected. No tension. No insecurity. She just nodded slowly. "That's a hard question," she said. "But you don't owe her a rewrite of history." "I know," I replied. But I also don't want to lie. Rachel leaned back, looking out into the dark. Then don't. Just tell the truth you have now, not the truth she wants. So I did. The next morning I wrote back, Emily, yes, I loved you, deeply, honestly. And at some point, that love stopped being mutual. That doesn't erase what we had, but it does explain why it ended. I hope you find what you're looking for. Nathan. I didn't reread it 10 times. I didn't soften it. I didn't add apologies that weren't mine to give. I sent it, and that chapter closed, not with bitterness, but with truth. Life continued in its small, ordinary ways. Rachel met more of my friends. I met more of hers. There were awkward dinners and easy ones. Laughter that came quickly. Silences that didn't need filling. One night, after a long walk, she stopped under a streetlight and looked at me. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What made you finally walk away? I thought about it. The joke, I said, but not because it was cruel, because it was careless, and because she said it like I didn't exist. Rachel nodded. Being unseen hurts more than being hurt. Exactly. She reached for my hand. I see you. That was the moment something inside me finally unclenched. Not because someone else was validating me, but because I believed them. A few months later, we took a weekend trip out of town. Nothing fancy. A cabin, bad Wi-Fi, too many mosquitoes. We cooked together, played cards, talked until the fire burned low. One night, wrapped in a blanket on the porch, Rachel said, "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" I considered it carefully. I miss who I thought we were. I said, not who we actually became. She smiled softly. That makes sense. We didn't make promises that night. No declarations about forever. Just a quiet understanding. This was real, and real doesn't rush. The anniversary of the party came and went without me noticing at first. It wasn't until Eric texted, 1 year since the infamous backyard speech, that I paused. A year. I thought about the man I was then, standing frozen on a patio, realizing in real time that his marriage had already ended. He just hadn't caught up yet, and I felt something unexpected. Gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it forced. Because sometimes the worst moment of your life is the one that finally tells you the truth. That night, Rachel and I sat on the couch, pepper wedged between us, the house warm and lived in. She rested her head on my shoulder, not the way Emily had in those photos. This was different. This was chosen. Can I tell you something? Rachel said, "Yeah, I love you," she said. No pause, no drama, just certainty. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't feel it, but because I wanted to say it clean. I love you too, I said, not because I needed someone, but because I know who I am now. She smiled into my shoulder. Good. I'd hate to be a bandage. You're not, I replied. You're a partner. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I understood something I wish I'd known years ago. Love doesn't need to be loud to be real. Respect doesn't need an audience. And walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the first honest step toward finally being found. Time does something funny when your life finally fits. It doesn't rush anymore. It doesn't drag. It just moves. Steady, unremarkable, kind. Rachel and I slipped into a rhythm that felt almost invisible from the outside. No dramatic milestones. No social media declarations. Just shared calendars and side jokes, and a growing sense that we were building something quietly sturdy. Then life, as it tends to, tested it. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. My dad. We weren't estranged, but we weren't close either. Our relationship lived in updates and obligations, not intimacy. So when I saw his name flash on my screen in the middle of the workday, my stomach tightened. "Hey," he said after a pause, "you got a minute?" I stepped outside, the sun harsh against the concrete. He didn't waste time. "Your mom's sick." The words landed heavier than I expected. Cancer. Early stages, they thought. Treatable. The doctor always said that, like it was a charm that could keep fear at bay. I drove to my parents' house that night. Familiar streets, unfamiliar weight. My mom looked smaller, still smiling, still trying to make coffee like nothing had changed. I stayed late, fixed a cabinet hinge, took out the trash, did all the things that let me avoid sitting with what this really meant. When I got home, Rachel was waiting on the couch. She stood the moment she saw my face. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She wrapped her arms around me and held on. No advice, no silver linings, just presence. That was when I realized something quietly terrifying and beautiful. This wasn't just love in the easy seasons anymore. This was love in the unsteady ones. The next few months were hard. Appointments, schedules, long drives, waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic, and old magazines. I watched my dad try to be strong and fail at it. I watched my mom joke her way through fear. And through all of it, Rachel stayed. Not hovering, not sacrificing herself. Just there. She dropped off meals, texted reminders, sat with my mom and listened to stories I'd heard 100 times but never really absorbed. One evening, driving home after chemo, my mom said softly, "She's good for you." I kept my eyes on the road. "Yeah, you seem steadier," she added. I thought about that later. Steady, not exciting, not dramatic, just reliable. One night, after a particularly rough day, I snapped at Rachel over something stupid. A missed call, a forgotten errand. The words came sharper than I meant them to. The silence afterward felt heavy. I braced myself. Old patterns screamed, "This is where it breaks." But Rachel didn't raise her voice. She said, "I know you're scared, but don't make me the place you put it." I swallowed hard. "You're right. I'm sorry." She nodded. "Thank you." That was it. No escalation. No punishment. Repair instead of rupture. I'd never learned that growing up. Later that night, I said, "I don't want to become someone who hurts the people who stay." She turned toward me. "Then don't. Talk to me before it leaks out sideways." So I did. I talked about the fear of losing my mom, about the guilt of not being closer before, about the quiet terror of realizing how much I now had to lose. Rachel listened, and when I finished, she said, "You're allowed to be scared. Just don't be alone in it." That sentence stayed with me. Months passed. My mom responded well to treatment, not out of the woods, but moving forward. Hope returned cautiously, like a skittish animal. Life softened again. One evening, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, Rachel looked up and said casually, "Have you ever thought about moving?" I blinked. "Like furniture? Or cities?" She smiled. "Eventually cities." The old version of me would have panicked. Heard ultimatums where none existed. Instead, I asked, "Where would you want to go?" She shrugged. "Not running from anything. Just toward something new. Someday." I nodded. I could see that. And I meant it. Not because I was ready to pack up tomorrow, but because the idea didn't feel like escape. It felt like expansion. A few weeks later, we hosted a small dinner at my place. Eric, a couple of friends, low-key, comfortable. At one point, Eric raised his glass and smirked, to not making jokes that ruin our lives. Laughter rippled around the table. Rachel squeezed my knee under it. I caught her eye and smiled. Later, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked to dry, she leaned against the counter and said, "You know, a year ago, I thought love was about intensity." I rinsed a glass. "And now I think it's about safety," she said. "Not boredom safety. Truth safety." I dried my hands and turned to her. "I feel that too." She studied me for a moment, then said, "I want to build something with you. No ring, no pressure, no timeline, just intention." "I know," I said, "and I want that too." Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the house felt full, not of noise, but of meaning. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how far I'd come from that patio, from that moment of public humiliation that felt like an ending. It wasn't. It was a beginning disguised as a loss. And as I drifted towards sleep, one final truth settled in. The right love doesn't make you prove yourself. It gives you room to become yourself. The idea didn't arrive with fireworks. It showed up on a random Thursday, folded into an ordinary moment. Rachel leaning against kitchen counter, barefoot, reading an article aloud while I chopped onions too aggressively. "Listen to this," she said. "Remote roles are opening up like crazy in Santa Fe." I shrugged. "High desert. Good art. Bad Wi-Fi." She smiled. "You're not saying no." "I'm not saying yes either," I replied, then paused. "I'm saying I'd think about it." That was new. Old me would have needed certainty before curiosity, would have needed guarantees before imagination. This version of me allowed the thought to breathe. Over the next few weeks, it became a conversation, not a plan, not a pressure point, just something we circled gently. Santa Fe turned into maybe somewhere like it. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere with more sky. We made a rule without naming it. No decisions made from fear. No staying just because leaving felt hard. No leaving just because staying felt familiar. Meanwhile, my mom kept getting stronger. Hair growing back. Energy returning in cautious increments. The house felt lighter again. My dad laughed more easily. One afternoon, as we fixed a fence together, he said, "You seem settled." I smiled. "I feel it." He nodded, then surprised me. "I wasn't always great at showing it, but I'm proud of you." That one stuck. A month later, Rachel got an offer. Not in Santa Fe, but flexible enough that it could be anywhere. She didn't celebrate right away. She brought it to me like a fragile thing. "I don't want this to change us," she said. "It won't," I replied, "unless we let it." That night, we made a pros and cons list that quickly devolved into doodles and jokes. Somewhere between bad sketches of mountains and a note that said Pepper hates road trips, we looked at each other and laughed. "Okay," she said, "what are we actually afraid of?" I thought for a long moment. "Messing up something good," I said. She nodded. "Yeah, me too." We sat with that. Then she said, "But we already know how to fix things. That's different from before." She was right. We weren't betting on perfection. We were betting on repair. The decision didn't come all at once. It arrived in stages. First, visiting a few places, then imagining furniture in different rooms, then slowly letting the idea feel less hypothetical. One night, as we lay on the floor surrounded by half-packed boxes, "Don't ask me why we packed before we're sure," Rachel said quietly, "Do you ever think about how this all started?" I smiled. "Unfortunately, yes." She laughed. "I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Something so painful leading here." "It's not strange," I said. "It's honest." She turned her head toward me. "I'm glad you didn't harden." "So am I replied. I was tempted. A few days later, I ran into Emily again. This time, it was at a coffee shop. She was already seated when I walked in. I considered leaving, but then she looked up and smiled, genuinely this time. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We exchanged small talk. Safe. Neutral. Then she surprised me. "I heard you might be moving," she said. "Yeah, we're considering it." She nodded. "That sounds right for you." I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. "I've done some thinking." "Therapy. Actual therapy," she added with a wry smile. Turns out I was terrified of being ordinary. I said nothing, letting her continue. "I mistook attention for love," she said quietly. "And I didn't know what to do when you didn't need applause." That felt like closure, but not the cinematic kind. The kind that simply settles. "I hope you're happy," she said. And this time, she meant it. "I am," I replied. "I hope you get there too." When I told Rachel about it later, she didn't tense. She didn't ask probing questions. She just said, "I'm glad she's growing." So was I. The move happened in the spring. Not dramatic, not tearful, just a long drive, a playlist we argued about, and Pepper yowling his disapproval from the back seat. The new place was smaller, brighter, quieter. The first night, sitting on the porch under a sky thick with stars, Rachel leaned into me and said, "This feels good." "It does," I agreed. Weeks passed. We found routines again. New coffee shops. New trails. New neighbors who waved instead of watched. One evening, While unpacking the last box, Rachel pulled out something wrapped in newspaper. A photo frame. Inside it was a picture I hadn't seen before. Us. Candid. Laughing. Taken by Eric at that dinner months ago. "I like this one," she said. "It's not trying." I studied it. Neither were we. Later that night, as we lay in bed, she traced a familiar circle on my wrist and said, "You know what I love most?" "What?" "That we didn't save each other." I smiled in the dark. "We met each other." "Yes," she said softly. "Exactly." And in that quiet room, far from the patio where everything once fell apart, I understood the final truth of it all. You don't rebuild your life by erasing the past. You rebuild it by choosing differently when the patterns reappear. And sometimes, the best ending isn't an ending at all. It's a continuation you finally feel ready for. The first real test of the new life wasn't dramatic. It was boring. It was a Tuesday that refused to be interesting. Work dragged. The internet went out halfway through a call. Pepper knocked over a plant and tracked dirt across the floor like he was making a point. Rachel came home quiet, not upset, just spent. Old patterns love days like that. They whisper, "This is it. This is where it dulls. This is where you start looking elsewhere." I recognize the voice now. So instead of escaping into my phone or pretending I wasn't tired, I said, "Do you want quiet together, or do you want distraction?" Rachel thought for a second. Quiet together. We cooked without music. Ate slowly. Let the silence be what it was. Rest, not distance. Later, curled up on the couch, she said, "This is the stuff that used to scare me." Same, I admitted. I thought calm meant something was wrong. She smiled. Turns out calm just means nothing's on fire. That became a saying between us. Nothing's on fire. Weeks layered into months. The seasons shifted in ways that felt visible out here. The light changing, the air thinning, the sky opening wider than it ever had back in Austin. One afternoon, hiking a trail that overlooked miles of open land, Rachel stopped and said, "Do you ever think about who you'd be if none of that had happened?" I knew what she meant. The party, the joke, the unraveling. "I think I'd be smaller," I said finally. "More careful, less honest." She nodded. "Pain didn't make you better." "No," I agreed. Choice did. That night, I had a dream about the patio. The string lights, the laughter, the moment everything tilted. But this time, instead of freezing, I stepped back. Watched it like a memory instead of reliving it. When I woke up, my chest wasn't tight. That's when I knew it was truly behind me. Not forgotten. Integrated. My mom visited that summer. Stronger. Softer. She sat on our porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset like it was a gift she'd only recently learned how to accept. "You're happy," she said. "Yes," I replied. She glanced at Rachel, who was inside making tea. "She doesn't compete with you." "No," I said. "She walks with me." My mom smiled. That's the difference. Later, after she left, Rachel asked what we talked about. I told her. She didn't blush, didn't deflect. She just said, "I'm glad we don't have to perform love." So was I. The question of marriage came up eventually, but not as a crossroads, more like a shared curiosity. One night, lying under a sky thick with stars, Rachel said, "If we ever did that, I'd want it to feel like a continuation, not a finish line." I turned toward her. "Me too." No ring followed. No secret planning. Just alignment. And that felt like everything. A year later, almost to the day, we hosted a small gathering. New friends. A few old ones who traveled to see us. Laughter carried easily in the open air. At one point, someone asked how Rachel and I met. We exchanged a look. "It's a long story," she said. I smiled. "And not the romantic kind people expect, but the honest kind," she added. As the night wound down, we stood together watching people drift away. The quiet returned, gentle and earned. Rachel leaned into me. "If you could go back and change that night, would you?" I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. "It hurt, but it told the truth." She nodded. "Good. I liked the version of you that came from it. I thought about the man I used to be, measuring himself by approval, afraid of rocking the boat, mistaking endurance for loyalty. And I felt compassion for him. But I didn't miss him, because the man standing here now knew something vital. Love isn't proven by how much you tolerate. It's revealed by how clearly you choose. And as the stars burned quietly overhead, I realized this wasn't a story about betrayal or divorce or even romance. It was a story about waking up. And once you're awake, you don't go back to sleep. I used to think endings were loud. Big speeches. Slammed doors. Final words that echo long after they're said. But the truth is, real endings are quiet. They arrive softly, almost politely, once you've already changed. That realization came to me months later, on an ordinary morning, while tying my running shoes. Same loop around the neighborhood. Same early light stretching across the pavement. Same rhythm of breath and footfall. But different man. As I ran, I passed a couple arguing on their porch. Not yelling, worse than that. Tight voices, arms crossed. The kind of argument that's been rehearsed 100 times. I recognized it instantly. That was us, once. Not the words, but the posture. I slowed, then stopped a block later, heart pounding, not from the run, from gratitude, because I didn't live there anymore. That morning, after the run, Rachel and I sat on the back steps with our coffee. Pepper lay between us, tail thumping lazily. She glanced at me. "You okay? You look somewhere else." I was thinking about how easy it is to stay stuck. I said, how long I did. She nodded. Stuck can feel safer than unknown. "Yeah," I said, "but it costs more." That sentence followed me all day. At work, in traffic, in the quiet moments when there's no distraction left. Staying costs more. People think leaving is the hard part. Walking away, starting over, learning new rhythms. But staying in a place where you're slowly shrinking, that drains you in ways you don't notice until you're hollow. That's what Emily never understood. She thought love was something you could joke about publicly and apologize for privately. If you felt like it, she thought I'd always absorb it. She thought I was permanent. A few weeks later, I ran into her unexpectedly. Grocery store. Cereal aisle. No dramatic music. No slow motion stare. Just two people reaching for the same box of granola. She froze first. I didn't. I simply said, "Hey!" She looked tired. Not messy. Not broken. Just worn. Like someone who'd been holding up a version of herself that was getting heavier every day. "Hey!" she replied, voice flat. There was a pause. The kind where the past presses in, waiting to see if it's welcome. It wasn't. "I heard you moved," she said. "Yeah. Looks like it suits you. Feels like it," I said. Another pause. She glanced at my cart. Dog treats. Fresh produce. Boring, healthy life stuff. "Is she?" Emily started, then stopped. I knew who she meant. "Yes," I said. "She is." Emily nodded slowly. "Good." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just acceptance. Maybe even regret. But regret doesn't undo impact. "I owe you an apology," she said suddenly. Not for the joke. For believing you'd never leave. I studied her face. The woman I once planned a future with. The stranger she'd become. Apology accepted. I said, "But it doesn't change the ending." She swallowed. "I know." We stood there, surrounded by cereal boxes and fluorescent lights. Not enemies. Not lovers. Just two people who learned different lessons from the same story. "Take care, Nathan," she said. "You too, Emily." And that was it. No closure speech. No victory lap. Just peace. When I told Rachel later, she listened without interruption. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered it. Lighter. Not because I won. Because I don't need anything from her anymore. She smiled. That's freedom. That night, we talk about the future. Not in 5-year plans or bullet points. Just feelings. Possibilities. What if we keep choosing this, she asked. Not comfort. Not fear. Just honesty. Then we'll be okay, I said, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because honesty doesn't promise ease. It promises clarity. Months passed. We hosted holidays, built routines, learned each other's quiet signals, the difference between needing space and needing closeness. We argued sometimes, but we didn't wound. We disagreed without disrespect. We repaired instead of retreating. One evening, sitting by the fire pit, Rachel said, "You know what I think your real breaking point was?" I raised an eyebrow. "The party?" She shook her head. "No, it was when you realized you weren't afraid of being alone anymore." She was right. The fear of being alone keeps people trapped in rooms that are slowly filling with smoke. Once you lose that fear, you stop accepting crumbs. You stop laughing at jokes that hurt. You stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. And here's the thing no one tells you. The moment you choose yourself, not selfishly, but honestly, the right people don't leave. They come closer. Sometimes, viewers ask me why I tell this story. Why relive it? Why not just move on quietly? Here's why. Because somewhere, someone is watching this right now, sitting next to a person who just embarrassed them in public, or dismissed their feelings as a joke, or convinced them that being hurt means being fragile. And they're wondering if it's really that bad, if they're overreacting, if they should just swallow it. So let me say this clearly. If someone laughs at your pain, if they turn your dignity into entertainment, if they believe you'll stay no matter what, that's not love. That's a test. And you don't pass it by enduring. You pass it by walking away. Healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet morning run, a shared silence on the couch, a partner who asks, "What do you need?" and actually listens to the answer. Sometimes healing looks like choosing yourself without announcing it, and letting the people who underestimated you watch from a distance as you build a life they no longer get access to. So if you're there right now, if you're standing under someone else's string lights, laughing along while something inside you cracks, know this: you're not weak for feeling it. You're not dramatic for noticing it. And you're not wrong for wanting more. The moment you stop performing for someone who doesn't value you, that's the moment your real story begins. And trust me, it's quieter, but it's real, and it's worth it.